Heart to Heart. Real people having real conversations about things that matter most to you. I'm Sherry Elise.
I'm Cyrus Webb.
I'm Rich Osagara.
I'm Patrice Tanaka.
And we are Heart to Heart.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Heart, the interactive talk show where you are our fifth co-host and help us to be able to pick the topics that kind of drive our conversation. So glad that you all could be with us today. Feel free to be able to let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. And also make sure you guys are sharing the love as well. Let other people know what you're enjoying today to make sure that they can be able to be a part of this as well. As I said, you guys are part of this program. So there will be a link that's in the chat for you guys to be able to submit your own questions, just like we have questions that we'll be going through today that are going to be really exciting to see which one is going to be in the Heart to Heart vault for us to be able to discuss. So make sure you guys do go ahead and take a look at that. The three questions we're going to be choosing from today, number one is from Nanako. How can we collectively fight against corrupt judicial systems? Amy asked, why do people hate and judge instead of trying to understand with compassion and an open heart? And then Martine asked, how do you feel about big moves like geographic ones? So three really good questions, and we're looking forward to diving into that in the second part of our program. But to get things kicked off, we're going to welcome in our co-hosts that are going to be joining us today. Sherry has the day off. She's a little under the weather. So, Sherry, we're sending you our best. But we do have our lovely producer, Tracy Allen, joining Patrice and Rich and I. Glad to have you all with us today.
Hello, hello.
Hey, everybody.
Rich, glad to have you back. Well, Rich, before we get into it, we have to ask, how was the trip? We know you joined us, kind of virtually, which all of us are virtual, I guess. But you joined us in spirit last week. How was the trip?
Yes. It was lovely. Sedona, if you haven't been to Sedona, Arizona, then you got to go. It's so gorgeous that I kept saying, like, when are they going to roll away this fake movie set that I'm looking at? Because it's just so colorful and so vivid and just shocking if you've never seen anything like that in person. Yeah. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, it's almost that same kind of feel, not as big, of course, but it is gorgeous and a lot of spiritual energy, as people will say there. And I had some interesting experiences. I'll leave it at that.
Wow. Well, I've never been, Rich, so it's something for me to be able to look forward to. Martine, thank you so much for joining us live in the chat. So, guys, I had mentioned to you guys before we went on here, as you guys know, I'm quite the nerd, so I read a lot of books. And a book that has been on my mind a lot recently, I'm going to be doing a video about it later, is this book by Lorianne Gibson called Dance Your Dance. This book is so powerful as she goes through her life. And one of the things that she talks about is the importance of trusting that voice, of trusting your instincts, even when people kind of are going against you and not really on your side, the importance of not losing that voice. So I wanted to ask all of you, how is trusting your own voice? How has that served you well? Who'd like to kick things off? Not everybody at once.
I'll go. I mean, I always trust my voice, my own intuition, and sometimes when I don't, and I can be having this thing going on in my head about, should I send that email? Should I not? I mean, I go back and forth. And then I said, well, there's nothing wrong with this email. So I sent, and it wasn't, a hateful email or just an email, and there was like a kind of a pretty violent reaction against that email. And in fact, it had to do with this show, which is what reminded me of it when you asked that question. I had alluded to, I put in a link for one of our recent episodes, which I was really, excited about, and where we talked about the insurrection on January 6th and how, our hope was that everyone could kind of come together and start listening and hearing one another again. And just from that, this person deduced that I was not a Trump supporter, and so he didn't want to have anything to do with me. But it was so funny that I was actually going back and forth about, should I send this email with the link, or So when I don't listen to my inner voice, to my intuition, I can get into trouble. But in a way, I don't really want to be working with someone who has that kind of reaction to something that I said.
Yeah.
So it all worked out for the best in the end. So
I love that. Patrice, I want to mention Martine says, I remember when I couldn't trust myself. It's so much better to be the most dependable person in my life.
Yes.
Martine, I totally agree with that. It's so powerful. I know for myself, when I read that in Lorianne's book, the thing that I thought about was I wouldn't be where I was today if I didn't trust my voice, because especially in my home state of Mississippi, there were people when I got into the industry tried to make me the next Oprah or the next Tavis Smiley because they're both from here. And I felt that to be stressful because I'm not Oprah and I'm definitely not Tavis Smiley. I mean, they have their own unique style and voices, but I just had to just be myself. And people told me, well, you're not going to make it. You're not going to be, you're not, you don't have the attitude. You don't have this, you don't have that. And I knew that I had to do what felt right for me. And it definitely, I'm so glad that I have. Maybe it took me longer than for some people, but I would not have taken anything for the journey. So I'm so glad that I've been able to do that too, to trust my own voice.
Mm.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
And I'll start with what Holly says here. Trusting my voice is at the core of who I am and what I do. It is an external representation of my truths. It is a critical piece of helping clients to heal. And so, that's so powerful and so true. I just recently did a blog and video talking about the importance, the main ingredient of doing your business is belief. You have to believe that you can do what it is that you say that you're going to do to help people. And if you don't believe it, then they're not going to believe it. And therefore you can't do it. It's just not going to work well. And I think the reason that I hesitated and even wanting to answer is because, there are so many times that I believe I can do something and then it doesn't work out like I want. But then, I'm so grateful for the attitude of understanding that just because it didn't work out the way I want it right now, doesn't mean that it's not going to be a huge benefit in the future. And so I was watching a little snippet of Dave Chappelle last night, and he talked about how his father had done something when he was just a little boy that impacted his life for this current time. He was able, because his father quit a job and fought for the rights of South Africa, Dave Chappelle is now able to go to South Africa as an adult. And so there's just so many things that we take that chance. We just do it, move forward and see what happens, and just trust and believe that it's going to work out. Maybe right and not immediately, but over time it will.
Yeah. I love that. I totally agree with you, Tracy. Rich, what are you thinking, Rich? What are you thinking?
Me? Well, this is actually something that I teach, how to cultivate your intuition, how to tap into your energy centers, to really fine tune your ability to hear your voice. And I'm talking about intuition, not just like my self-talk, not my self-talking, that voice, but the voice that knows better than I do.
Yeah.
Except for I usually think it doesn't. And so from that perspective, perhaps more spiritually speaking, listening to the voice, whatever a person calls that, God, the universe, higher self, etc. It's always speaking to us. But in my case, am I always listening? Not always. And usually, it's easy to follow it when it's something I want to hear or that I think in my logical brain makes sense. But when it doesn't make sense, or it seems contrary to whatever I'm working on, or it's the opposite direction of a way that I'm moving towards, then that's when I tend to say, yeah, maybe not, or maybe that'll change. And I guess a good example is coming to San Diego from New York City after 18 years of living in New York City. You know, I'm a New Yorker. You know, as far as I'm concerned, someone validated that for me yesterday. They said, "Oh, you're still a New Yorker." We all had to live there for 7 years. But when that prompt came, I laughed. I was like, "Oh, you're crazy." You know, I call it God. You're crazy, God. And I didn't listen for a whole year, even though it kept coming. And what I know in my experience is when we don't listen to that voice, it will find you. It knows where you sleep. It knows what's under your bed, right? It's relentless because it's the truth. And the more I resist, the bigger the cosmic 2x4 that's going to hit my head will hit my head at some point. And finally, I said, okay, fine. I'll leave New York and I'll move to India for a year, or Barcelona, or the places in the world I want to see. But the universe said, no, you're going to San Diego, which was not even anywhere on any list anywhere in my life. And I finally, after another year, gave in and said, fine, I'll go. And, coming here, it was very confusing because it was so different from what I had known and everything I was about. It was like completely contrary. And it's taken a while to see how it's all unfolding. But I know in my heart that this was the right thing to do for me at that time. And will I end up somewhere else? Probably, but who knows? And what I have learned is to never say never.
Yeah.
The universe has a different idea.
Yeah. I love that, Rich, and especially the never say never part. I used to be one of those people who said, "Oh, I'd never do that," or that couldn't be me, or I wouldn't make that choice. And I've been proven wrong time and again. And I have been in situations where I've had to make that those difficult choices. But I love what each one of you said, and I think it's such a great thing because one of the things that Lorianne says in the book is if she had not trusted her voice, she would not be where she is today. It was not easy, but it was necessary. So would love to know for you guys, even if those who are joining us via the replay, let us know in the comment section how trusting your own voice, how that has been something that's been beneficial for you and served you well. Also, keep in mind that you all are a big part of the show. Here in just a little bit, we're about to open up the vault to find out what this week's questions are that we're going to be discussing. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. But also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you guys are sharing the love and letting people know, too, how they can be able to enjoy Heart to Heart as well. Guys, I think, the other thing is, as we're kind of having this conversation, I think about, Patrice, what you had asked last week. And I think, too, us all coming together, right? I mean, is kind of part of listening to that voice. We could have easily said, when Sherry came to each one of us, said no. But I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to be able to be a part of this amazing platform and to be able to have these conversations that really are not being had in other places. So I hope for our audience that you guys are continuing to do that, to be able to trust your own voice and to be able to see where it takes you. And Rich, I love what you said too about, will you probably go somewhere else? Yes. But it does not mean you can't enjoy where you are. And I think that is the beautiful thing here. Yes. Well, it is that time for us to be able to get to our 3 questions for this week. And again, 3 great ones that were chosen. And one of them will be the one that's in the vault for us to be able to choose. So we'll do a recap again of those 3 questions. Again, from Nanako, it is, how can we collectively fight against corrupt judicial systems? Amy writes, why do people hate and judge instead of trying to understand with compassion and an open heart? And Martine asks, how do you feel about big moves like geographic ones? So, which one is in the vault this week? And it is, how can we collectively fight against corrupt judicial systems? Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for that question. And it's a big one. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say, but I'll just say for myself, I'm not a person, which this is no surprise probably to anybody. I'm not a rah-rah. I'm not a marcher. That's not who I am. That's not my style. I am a person that believes in hand-to-hand combat, as it were, and each person doing their own thing. And I think that all happens in different ways. But I mean, for me, the answer to the question is, for one, realizing that a person can make a difference. And even though something may seem big, and we see it all the time in these Goliath situations where it seems like the odds are stacked against the little guy, how just by being able to take a stand and to galvanize and to unite with other people who feel the same way, that change can happen. I mean, I think about, being a person of color, how I have benefited from that change because of people standing up. And I think, in so many different rights and in so many different communities, that has definitely been the case. Guys, what about you? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, let me jump in here real quick. Nanako, that's my friend, and I know what she's been going through. And it's interesting. I didn't even think about this when I mentioned Dave Chappelle just a little while ago, talking about how his father stood up by quitting a job that was supporting what was going on with apartheid and stuff. And now he's able to, as a Black man, go to South Africa and not have all of the same stuff that was happening way back then happening to him now. And so, it's a tough fight because we're talking about a whole system. And so, like you, Cyrus, I'm not somebody that really is comfortable getting out marching and stuff like that. But I do believe that there's ways to organize and get things done. Just like, we had to do with voting. There were people that organized and said, hey, we're going to get this handled. We're going to fight this system. So I'm just going to read something real quick that I came across because, I already knew the question. So.
Right.
That's not fair, Tracy.
It really doesn't offer a real answer. But there was this judge that said, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase just a little bit because it was kind of long. But he said, corruption is a crime of calculation. And when public officials can calculate that they won't be caught, persecuted, or punished, there's nothing to prohibit them from robbing others. And so I thought that was really powerful for him to say that. So I really think it's just a matter of we just have to keep finding ways to break through as a whole, and that's all I can think of regarding that.
Yeah.
And I agree with both of you. It starts with people taking action in whatever way they feel comfortable, and at least speaking up against the corrupt judicial system or racial injustice anywhere, because unless we speak up and have our voices heard, we can't recreate that groundswell that will then move, elected officials to do the right thing or focus on where we feel that focus needs to be had. So it really is about, doing something, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And I'm somebody who background is in communication, so I'm very vocal, on social media, in written blog posts, in webinars, speaking up for injustice anywhere, because injustice anywhere is a problem, and against every group, any group, it's a problem. And I think it does take a lot of us to really kind of turn the ship in the right direction. So just do something where you are and do something. Yeah.
Really good point, Patrice.
So, Cyrus, I'm waiting for you to say, what about you, Rich?
He wants a special invitation.
Thank you. So glad you will. Well, I'm going to come. I mean, the question had judicial system, right? Corrupt judicial system, and there's corruption all over the place. But in the judicial system, in particular, in the United States and many other countries around the world, but I'll speak from where we live here in the United States. I have a brother who has spent most of his adult life in prison. And for things that I'm pretty certain, especially now after seeing how our judicial systems work and how punishment is doled out based on, in many cases, your skin color. And I really feel that for what he's there for, if he was white, he would have been out decades ago. Because I see other people who have done, made similar mistakes or whatever, who get a slap on the hand versus hard prison time, right? And so that speaks to corruption. Now, the thing, though, is we can just be upset about it and talk all day about how awful that is and how unfair it is, but nothing changes unless, as we've all been saying, we step up to do something about it. And so, how do we fight, a corrupt system? Well, you have to care first. You have to care enough. Actually, I'll take it back. You need to be aware that it exists. And a lot of people have their head in the sand because it doesn't affect them. If they're not in prison or someone in their life isn't in prison, then they may not even be aware, right? So we got to become aware. And then there's the, well, how can I be a part of making a change? And there's no lack of places and organizations in your own city, wherever you're watching this in this country or around the world, where there are organizations fighting for fairness in the judicial system. In the word judicial, that pertains to judges. And what a lot of people don't know is how our judicial system works. Many judges are appointed, and they're appointed by presidents or by other elected officials. And so all of these things tie together. And if you want to make systemic change, then you have to really care about politics, how they work. And I'm not saying, being a Democrat or a Republican. I'm just talking about, how does politics work in this country? How do people end up as judges who make the decisions that we're talking about? And if you don't take the time to learn all of that, then you really don't have a right to care or say that it's unfair, because you need to educate yourself. And in our country, sadly, there's a tremendous amount of ignorance around this. And ignorance is when you don't know about something versus being stupid. You know it and you do it anyways. There's a lot of ignorance around how how politics work and how the judicial system works, even how the police departments work, right? And it's really easy to watch the news or hear other people talk on social media about what's going on, and to outrage and give an angry emoji without ever knowing what any of it actually means and how these things happen. So you got to become aware, and you have to be willing to want to do something about it, and then actually take the action. And that's easy. Google it. And there's a million organizations. And a lot of them happen to be in churches. I know my church, I'm part of the Racial Equality Project. And one of the things that we focus on is reform in politics, but in our judicial system to create more fairness about how people receive punishment for doing the wrong thing. And it's heavily weighted towards people of color, people who are not white skinned, whether they're white or not, but it's the skin color. It's weighted towards putting people of color in positions in prison for long term, because it's a business. It's a money-making business. And the longer they keep you there, the more money they make. So there's a lot to it. And you got to be aware. Stop being ignorant. Take action. And you can start to help shift things, or not.
Yeah. Rich, I wanted to bring in what Holly says, and Holly, thank you for that. First of all, Tracy, she said beautiful what you shared, but then she said, along with giving to certain causes, I am mindful about who and what companies, organizations, businesses, etc., are supporting, and I do not support them. And I think that's the thing. I think it goes to your point, though, Rich, about being aware. I think a lot of times you're so right. I think, I grew up around a grandmother who was very empathetic to others, which made me think about others and try to put myself in situations. So I looked at things differently. But so many people, and I really think a lot of it is they're just so in their own stuff. They think, well, you know what, I can't worry about that because I have my own thing to worry about. But I love what you said, because all of us can do something, and we have so many real life examples. I think about, and I can't remember the young lady's name, but the young lady who actually filmed the George Floyd murder.
Yeah.
She actually got a Pulitzer Prize honorable mention.
Yes.
This year, because that's what she was able to do. She was able to share this, with the world. And I think, for some people that may have looked like, oh, she's just filming something for the internet. But what she did, played a part in somebody, actually being held accountable for their actions. So I think, as we're talking about this topic, I think it's really one of those important things to remember, that there is no little I. All of us have a opportunity and our own power to be able to do something toward not only making life better for ourselves, but also helping other people.
Yeah. You're making me think of in New York City, especially after 9/11, there's a slogan that says, if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
Because, it took everyone to be aware of what could be a bomb. There's a backpack left on a subway bench, report it. And the same, it applies to anything, though. And I don't mean, because your mocha chocolate was, wrong at Starbucks. I don't mean that kind of see something. I mean, like, if you see something that's not right, that is out of order, truly, then we can say something about it. And there's so many ways to get involved like this. There's people who volunteer to send texts for 30 minutes to tell people about an organization who's doing certain work. I get these all the time. You can make, a $5 or a $1, any 50-cent donation to an organization that supports the cause, who is doing the work, right? And that just goes back to the awareness, who's doing what, and at what level can I participate?
Yeah.
I just want to say this real quick, because, again, this is somebody that I personally know. I know what her fight is. And it's so important for friends and family to help, because, like, we're talking in general, but then when there's one person going through something that we personally know, it's so important for us to support that person. And like I said, I might not get out in March, but some of the things that you guys are sharing are little things that we can do to concentrate the efforts towards that. So I just want to, point that out for Nanako.
Yeah, and we definitely thank Nanako for sharing, as well as Amy and Martine as well. Thank you so much for submitting your questions. If you would like to submit questions for us to be able to talk about here on Heart to Heart, all you have to do is click the questionnaire you'll see in the comments section. We would love to be able to hear from you. And also make sure you guys are following us, especially because we have an announcement to make. This is episode 24 for us. And actually, episode 26 is going to be our season finale. That's going to be on Wednesday, June the 30th. Appropriately, the end of the month. We are wrapping up our first season. It's hard to believe we've been together for already for 20 plus weeks, but we're going to be in that final episode really thanking you and reflecting on this first season, what it's been like for us to be able to open the vault, what may be a memorable question for us and conversation, and we want you all to be involved in this as well. Again, when Sherry Elise initially created this show, it was with you, the audience, in mind. So we want you all to be able to join us again on June the 30th, so we still have a couple more weeks. But make sure you guys are with us next week. As always, make sure you guys tune in for Heart to Heart. Glad to have Rich back with us. Patrice, Tracy. So glad that you are here with us. And thank you, our audience, for being with us as well. And it goes without saying, continue the conversations going. And we want, just like we are trying to share from our heart, we want you to continue to share from yours as well. Until next week, you all make it a great one. We'll see you next week.